C'est donc une thématique qu'on pourrait considérer pas comme les autres thématiques. C'est pourquoi son traitement aussi mérite une attention particulière et une approche spécifique. Or, qu'est-ce que nous constatons généralement dans les différents fonctionnements, nos différents fonctionnements? Il apparaît des divisions ou des oppositions entre les principaux acteurs qui se fondent essentiellement sur des approches méthodologiques et des objectifs à atteindre. Les universitaires dans leur approche, ont plutôt leurs approches et leurs objectifs. Les organisations de la société civile également ont les leurs. Il est de même des gouvernants. Généralement, donc, ces différents acteurs-là agissent de façon sectaire. Universitaires mènent des recherches en vue donc de comprendre le phénomène. Les organisations de la société civile mènent des actions en vue d'apporter des réponses appropriées aux difficultés des populations. Et les gouvernants, quant à eux, s'appuient sur certaines organisations internationales, généralement les organisations du système des Nations Unies, ou les coopérations au niveau des ambassades des pays occidentaux pour apporter des réponses ponctuelles aux besoins des populations. On note que chaque entité donc agit dans son secteur, dans son domaine, comme si l'autre n'existait pas. De ce fait, nous assistons plutôt à des actions qui ne sont pas coordonnées. Quelquefois, pour un même problème, plusieurs études sont menées, puis souvent même, les mêmes informations sont capitalisées ou collectées plusieurs fois par des structures différentes. Une telle manière de faire ne permet pas d'appréhender efficacement le phénomène des violences sexuelles. Par exemple, en Côte d'Ivoire, où les populations ont été plus souvent victimes de violences sexuelles durant les périodes de conflit, l'on a assisté ou on a pu constater une présence massive des différents intervenants, soit dans la recherche, soit dans la prise en charge des victimes, mais les actions n'étaient pas coordonnées. Ainsi, pour remédier à une telle situation, les différents acteurs ont décidé de constituer des groupes de travail avec des thématiques spécifiques qu'ils ont dénommés des sous-clusters. C'est un terme apprécié à l'anglais. Protection, par exemple, protection, ou bien cluster violence basée sur le genre. Et ces plateformes donnaient l'occasion aux différents intervenants d'échanger des informations sur les actions qu'ils mènent sur le terrain. Malgré cette opportunité, nous estimons que cette présence présente des insuffisances, car les activités n'étaient pas planifiées et on a pu observer que tous les intervenants n'étaient pas représentés. On pourrait donc se demander comment on pourrait améliorer le flux multidirectionnel entre les organisations de la société civile, les universitaires et les intervenants dans le domaine des politiques. On observe que, de ce que je viens de dire, il mérite d'avoir une synergie d'action entre les universitaires, les organisations de la société civile et le gouvernement. Il doit donc collaborer pour des actions plus efficientes auprès des populations. Dans ces conditions, des recherches au niveau universitaire concernant les violences sexuelles doivent aboutir à une application pratique sur le terrain en faveur des populations. C'est dire que le chercheur ne peut se contenter de se servir des victimes juste pour recueillir des informations ou des données pour sa recherche et s'en aller. Il doit se préoccuper donc de la gestion de l'état psychologique des victimes. C'est-à-dire que si au cours d'une investigation ou au cours de ces investigations, le chercheur découvre qu'il y a des victimes qui ont besoin d'un soutien de quelque nature que ce soit, il doit agir promptement pour les sauver ou les référer à des structures spécialisées. Dans un autre sens, on peut voir que les organisations de la société civile, en vue donc de comprendre ou d'approfondir une question liée aux violences sexuelles, doivent recourir aux chercheurs. Et les résultats de ces types de recherches devraient aider les organisations de la société civile à améliorer leurs actions en faveur des victimes. Ces mêmes résultats devraient servir de base pour des plaidoyers auprès des gouvernants en vue de la mise en œuvre de politiques durables pour améliorer la situation des populations. Je donne un exemple aussi en Côte d'Ivoire, où des études nous ont montré que généralement nos forces de sécurité avaient une attitude méprisante vis-à-vis des problèmes de violence sexuelle. Et c'est pourquoi, au niveau donc des organisations de la société civile, nous avons entamé donc un plaidoyer auprès des gouvernants pour que l'État puisse intégrer dans le curriculum de formation des policiers, selon les forces de sécurité de façon générale, des modules sur les droits humains de façon générale et des modules qui parlent aussi des problèmes de violence sexuelle. Comment on pourrait donc améliorer le niveau de collaboration entre les différents acteurs? À ce sujet-là, à ce niveau, nous faisons 4 propositions. Pour nous, il est important et impérieux de concevoir des projets complets, on dit un projet complet, qui intègre tous les aspects du phénomène, qui ne va pas se contenter seulement à identifier sans agir. Donc, ces projets complets-là devaient inclure les enquêtes, les actions de prise en charge des victimes qu'on rencontre sur le terrain. Deuxième proposition, c'est qu'on puisse créer une plateforme d'échange entre les chercheurs, les organisations de la société civile et les différentes politiques et les gouvernants, en vue donc de faciliter le travail en synergie. Comme troisième proposition, nous devons mettre à la disposition donc de la plateforme les résultats des recherches pour éviter les répétitions fâcheuses d'une même recherche sur les mêmes populations. Ceci pour éviter le harcèlement, on pourrait dire, en groupe des victimes. Et comme quatrième et dernière proposition, nous préconisons la formation et la sensibilisation des acteurs sur les spécificités des violences sexuelles afin que les activités dans ce domaine soient l'affaire des spécialistes et que n'importe qui ne s'aventure pas à mener une enquête sur les violences sexuelles pour ne pas mettre en péril la vie donc des victimes. Je voudrais donc terminer en disant que les recherches sur les violences sexuelles doivent pouvoir nourrir l'action. C'est-à-dire, les recherches doivent aboutir à l'action. Et vice-versa, les actions aussi doivent pouvoir susciter des recherches au niveau donc des universités ou des centres de recherche. Et cela ne peut être possible que dans une synergie d'intervention. La violence sexuelle touche à l'intimité de la victime. Elle mérite donc d'être traitée avec délicatesse par des spécialistes dans une approche intégrée et globale. Je vous remercie.
Merci. Thank you. That was thank you. That was a great introduction to the panel, nicely elaborating on this topic, how research should really be directed towards practical ends and how collaborations between academics and civil society and policymakers can potentially lead to such ends. And I'll turn it over to Anne Bunny.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Professeur, qui aussi Blair and the other organizers. I'm going to reflect on some of the comments that have been made over the last couple of days and talk about the potential, but unfortunately I'm going to talk more about the challenges of research networks, research partnerships. In particular, research networks between universities based in North America or Europe and researchers based in women's NGOs in sub-Saharan Africa. And so what have we learned from experience in these networks and how can we make them more successful? I'm going to use two projects to animate my discussion of the potential and the challenges of research networks. The first is the Coalition for Women's Human Rights in Conflict Situations. Some of you in the room have participated as members of the coalition or have attended meetings of the coalition. The coalition was set up as a group of lawyers, students, women's rights activists, and I'm missing something in there, and academics, university-based academics, to monitor the investigation and prosecution of sexual violence, first at the ICTR, at the International Criminal Tribunal for Rwanda. We actually were based at the Center for Rights and Democracy in Montreal and did monitor trials at the ICTR and subsequently worked in other countries. Je parle trop vite, ça marche pas? Je parle trop vite? Ça? Okay, lentement, okay. So that's the first project. Rights and Democracy has been closed by the Canadian government. Joanne referred to the current regime under which we are working in Canada. And the coalition now does not have an institutional home, so we are a virtual network at this point. The second project that Blair mentioned is the one that Blair mentioned, which is a project that I coordinate that is funded by Social Science and Humanities Research Council on gender, forced marriage in conflict situations. So enslavement for the purposes of forced marriage in conflict, and we're working in 5 countries. So I just want to say a couple of things reflecting on our discussions over the last couple of days, and then I'm going to quickly just give you points of the potential of networks and the challenges. One of the things is that listening over the last few days, it's clear to me that networks do exist. Networks between universities and NGO-based researchers, networks within regions, across countries, and between different specialists. So different types of researchers are in fact connected. So we heard from Jessica about FAS, about les femmes africaines solidarité. We've heard from, you've been here too. We've heard of a variety of networks and collaborations that exist. That doesn't mean necessarily that there isn't the need for further collaboration. So for example, in my own university, there are people doing relevant work who I don't know, because my university is like a small city, 30,000 students. Doris and I did not know about our respective projects up until a couple of years ago. So you can be in the same city, you can be in the same university, you can be in the same field, and not necessarily be well connected. So I think on the one hand they exist, and on the other hand there's more work that needs to be done. What I want to focus on, however, is the persistent global inequalities in knowledge production. So going back to this point about university-based researchers who are in Canada or the United States, and researchers based in NGOs in Africa. Here I think we have very specific problems in challenging the inequalities of power and the hierarchies in those networks, and that's what I'll focus on. So what are the positive things that I've taken away from collaborations over the last dozen years? I think it is essential to our work on sexual violence in conflict to bring voices into the academic discussions and into policy-making discussions from affected communities. To not have the field dominated by researchers who come, and I myself was one of them during my doctoral research. You fly into northern Nigeria, you do your research, you go back, yes, numerous times, but nonetheless, I publish my dissertation. I don't publish, actually, I didn't publish my dissertation. I finish my dissertation, I don't publish my dissertation. I still get a job, right? And I'm writing about northern Nigeria, right? So you have that model, the Human Rights Watch model of knowledge about conflicts and knowledge about sexual violence in conflict. So it's important to counter that with African voices from affected communities. Secondly, it's important that we level the playing field so that academic knowledge is being produced in Africa, and that there is capacity building in universities and in NGOs so that people are affecting policy agenda. And with that, I think comes another real benefit of networks, which is that the quality of research will improve. The type of knowledge and the quality of research will improve through those collaborations. And indeed, I would say that I think that everybody's skills will improve. So for example, in the project on forced marriage in conflict situations, we're working with historians of slavery, as well as women's human rights activists, as well as graduate students based in England, as well as university-based academics in Canada. Now, a lot of the historians are sharing their skills of working in archives, of trying to historicize what's going on in contemporary conflicts, and we all gain from that exchange of knowledge and skills. So what are the challenges? Well, as we heard yesterday, one of the persistent challenges is having the agenda dominated by donors. And I would just add, it's not just Ford Foundation, MacArthur, and private donors. The donor, this problem of donor-dominated agenda in research is also true for academic funding. So I get almost 100% of my research funding from the Social Science and Humanities Research Council. On the positive side, they are very interested in community-university partnerships. So we can capitalize on that interest and which we have. We've applied for funding, and they have sincere interest in community university partnerships. On the other hand, like any other donor, and like any other recipients on research, you are dependent on whether they think your topic is worthy of funding. So the priorities are determined not, of course, by affected communities, but rather by the Social Science and Humanities Research Council, and we all know the challenges there. In Nigeria, for example, when women were doing work on early and forced marriage there years ago, they first got funding around women's rights, and then the funders were more interested in HIV/AIDS. They shifted their focus. They were still doing the same work. They just described it as doing HIV/AIDS prevention, and they were putting in different applications. So I'm not saying we don't follow the research and we're not creative about it, but we have to acknowledge that's a challenge. I think more fundamental to our discussion is, as I said, these persistent inequalities in knowledge production. And we know that African universities have fewer resources than those of us working in Canadian and American universities. There's not the same access to computers. We were just talking earlier about the speed of the internet, whether you can get a connection, whether you can download an article. And I think one of the things that we can do as university-based researchers in Canada is download the information, get those articles off of our library sites and share them on network sites, websites that we might create here. Also, we heard yesterday about conditions of insecurity, so our colleagues working in very insecure situations, in particular, obviously, in DR Congo, but I would argue in other places as well. So you have these conditions these conditions of insecurity and challenges for researchers working in the field. I think the other thing that we have to be very honest with ourselves about is that sometimes academics' priorities, what we see as the most important topic for research, is not the same as our partners working in Uganda or in Kenya or elsewhere. So, and I'll give you an example that's putting my own faiblesse, my own weaknesses on the table. So I thought I'm really quite committed. I think it's really important when we're studying gender and sexual violence to talk about men. I think we need to talk to men and not just, wait, I'm getting all excited.
I can tell.
So I think it's really important if we're going to talk about gender, that gender is about the construction of masculinities and femininities. So it's about how men may have been themselves instructed to rape. They may not have been instructed. What were their experiences of sexual violence in conflict situations? So I took this to our team meeting in November, and with the 5-country teams, and I said, I really think that we have to be including interviews with men. And rightly, my colleagues said, we're not in that position just yet. We don't have adequate access to psychosocial support for men if we did these interviews. So I just give that as one example where I thought something might have been a very interesting, pressing, cutting-edge academic issue, but in fact, rightly so, the partnership made the decision that we'll do that in the next stage of the research when we apply for more funding, but it's not appropriate to do it now. So that's just one example where one has to be careful yourself. Your own research ego has to be put aside so that we're negotiating as partners on the ground. I'll conclude, right? I have only a few minutes. Yeah. So what do I think are some suggestions? I'm going to take my lead from my colleague. I also have 4 suggestions for how we can go forward here. I think we have to take a step back sometimes and assess how social change comes about. If we're interested in policy change, for example, around reparations in Uganda or around marriage laws in Sierra Leone, is that best achieved through international advocacy or through research that is going to be put in front of ministers, government officials, other NGOs on the ground to push for policy change at a local level? So I think we have to sometimes also step back from thinking that the audience is necessarily international. sometimes the audience for our research is actually very local, and that what our partners need is very local solutions. So we need to assist in that. Secondly, we have to be realistic in our goals. The work that I did with the coalition was really facilitating annual meetings. So it was my job at this point in the meeting each year to say the same thing to the coalition members. We only have limited time in a day. We only have limited amount of money and access to resources. So we have to be realistic. So for example, I'm hearing a couple of different themes here. One has to do with the extractive industries and its link to sexual violence. It doesn't necessarily mean that we need a huge network where we're all involved. It might be that some smaller regional networks are more effective. So let's be realistic and careful and modest and self-critical. Always just take a moment to be self-critical. Finally, as we talked about earlier, I think we need to build into our grant applications, those of us doing the grant applications outside, that we build in the money for salary replacement for university-based researchers here in Africa, and also salary replacement for NGO-based researchers, travel costs, office support, telephone costs. You have to be really careful to build a budget that's realistic, that can assist with research with your partners here in Africa. And finally, there has to be true collaboration. So in that I mean, people like me, I'm the principal investigator on a 5-country study. Unfortunately, I have control because it's my university that is the one that signs the checks and sends the money and does all that. One has to relinquish that control in order to make sure that decisions about budget are being made by the partnership. And I actually don't think we're at that point yet in our networks and partnerships with various different sectors and across different countries. Because frankly, working within the university sector does not really allow us, and I think Doris would agree, to relinquish that much control. I mean, my partners will sell you. I'm not sure they've got their wires for the money for the research yet, and it's been months. So I think those are some of the challenges, and I know there's some are mundane and some are structural, but I look forward to our discussion.
Thank you very much. You drew on your rich experiences and knowledge to draw a number of points which concerning collaborations, both their strengths and then some real limits or issues we need to address going forward. And now we'll turn it over to Jessica.
Thank you very much. I appreciate being invited to this panel, and I'll use this opportunity to share some experience of the work that I was involved in Uganda. Researching, we didn't even start off calling it sexual violence. We called it documenting the experiences of women in armed conflict. And actually it turned out to be mainly sexual violence and its repercussions on the health and welfare of the woman long after the conflict ends. Now, when we presented the initial findings, we met with a lot of resistance from Makerere University because the researchers felt that we had put too much heart into the research and too little head. And of course, we also took a bit of offense, but realized that maybe we didn't have good methods, and maybe we were not well trained in research to be able to do a good job. So the next thing we did was to invite them. We invited two researchers to help us, first of all to train us, and secondly to accompany us to do the research itself, which they did very well, except that part of it, they didn't have very good gender analysis. And therefore, at the end, it was more to do, we needed more feminist analysis, not so, feminist analysis. and we didn't feel that we got it, but we were polite enough to respect each other and continue working together. I must say that the work went very well, and we produced a very good report. But as we interviewed the survivors of sexual violence, we realized that there was need to bring in another angle. Because the war had ended in central Uganda for 13 years. And there were still women whose uteruses were still hanging between their legs, and they showed us. And we still had women who were living with the other repercussions of sexual violence. There was a woman who had been raped by 16 women, all at the same time, one after the other. 16 men, sorry, one after the other. And as a result, she had developed fistula and was leaking for 13 years, and no one had done anything about it. And when we went to do research in that area, the women were telling us we are sick and tired of people coming and doing their research and getting their PhDs on our bodies. What are you going to do for us right now? And we promised that we were going to do something. So when this dimension came in, we decided to team up not only with the researchers from Makerere, but also with a team of doctors, gynecologists, psychiatrists, and surgeons who came in also and had a discussion with these women. Now, some of the women we had thought had gynecological problems ended up having psychological problems. And those that we thought just had psychological problems ended up having deep, deep gynecological problems. So we started moving around with them, and they also produced their own report. After producing the two reports and making the recommendations, when we went out to disseminate the report, we invited, I have shared this with some of you already, so excuse me. We invited the Minister of Health in Uganda, and they sent the Director General of Health Services. And when he listened to our findings and our recommendations, then he said, well, you know what? We are now in the middle of working on our 5-year strategic plan, and I really realized that we have not done enough on the issues of mental health for women in conflict situations. Right now, I'm going to make sure that it gets in. And I remember that whenever we met at meetings, he would point out to me and he would say, Mrs. Ukwe is there. She can bear me witness that we have included this. Now, as a result, at that time in Uganda, we had fewer than 5 psychiatrists in the whole country. But as a result of that decision, right now at every referral center in the country, you have a mental health unit. And the training improved so that by now we have well over 30 psychiatrists in the country, and some have worked up to PhD level. And then we have psychiatric nurses, and all sorts of things. I'm just saying this to show that producing a good report can also produce good results. We were able, as a result of that work, to do the rest of the work in different areas in northern Uganda as well as eastern Uganda, in all the areas of Uganda where they have experienced conflict. But we also were able to get that funding, the MDG3 funding, and do research in Liberia and South Sudan, and accompanied also by a medical intervention. And we really came out satisfied that this kind of working together between academics and the civil society organizations really can yield results. The advantage we found was that we were able to be trained in in ensuring that there is a proper methodology in the kind of work we do, that that we can put our work, the work that civil society organizations do, within a theory. Because we always just went out and worked, and then someone else would come and put it in a theory and get their PhD and go out. But also we were able to link with other organizations. I remember there was someone from social work in Makerere University who was British, and she went back to Britain to do her PhD, and she did her PhD within the area where we were working with her. But she did not forget us after that. She still used to get money so that we could deepen the research. There was a change in attitude in everybody, including the doctors. Because I remember one of the gynecologists presenting, and she was asked what difference had come about as a result of working on this project. And she said, whenever a woman came in with a gynecological problem, I would just investigate that. But right now I have learned that the woman comes in with several other problems, apart from the gynecological problem which I'm looking at. And I've learned to just sit and talk to the woman. And the psychiatrists also had similar stories, as did the surgeons. And it benefited all of us. And we found out that it was very, very important for everyone doing research to seek to see change. It's not enough, yesterday one of my sisters here was talking about going into the research area and not being carried away by the questions or by what happens. Now imagine one time we went to interview one woman who had been burnt. She had grass put around her and petrol poured over her, and then she was burned. She just managed to escape, but with very, very bad burns. And she was telling us it was because her husband used to work in the present government in Uganda, and the rebels wanted money, and she said she didn't have the money, and when she said she didn't have money, they decided to burn her out. Now, when we were interviewing her, then she left us and went inside and came back with the whole top of her naked. And just looking at those burns, we could not help looking shocked. Now, many times I have come across women who have been abandoned after sexual violence. The husband cannot bear to be with a woman who has been violated. You must have asked for it anyway. And suddenly you are supposed to walk away with that information without showing any kind of compassion. I think researchers will have to, if we are going to work together on issues of sexual violence, we will need to put some heart into some of the researchers and then some head into the CSO workers. Also, I have a feeling that especially sexual violence in conflict situations in the Great Lakes region, a lot is known. And therefore, we need to go deeper in our collaborative research and find out what is known in this area and what still needs to be known, and do we have the courage to go deeper? Because many times I'm in a meeting and a Congolese woman talks and implicates Uganda. I, as a researcher, why should I feel that I need to defend Uganda? Do I know everything about the workings of my government? Why do I need to because many times I have found that researchers now leave the head and go to the heart and become very defensive of their own country. No, we have not done this. But maybe you have. Maybe someone else has done it on their behalf. And therefore, we need to have the courage to go deeper. And when we do go deeper and find these results, we must always remember that we are dealing with the lives of human beings. And therefore, if we find out this, it is incumbent on us to do something about it. If we don't, and we have our PhDs and we run away with them, history will judge us, and very harshly too. Thank you very much.
Many thanks, Jessica. You gave a wonderful example of a multidisciplined research team, bringing in health professionals, mental health professionals, NGO activists, academic researchers, and the mutual learning that occurred from that, as well as some differences of opinion and skills. And also brought the good example of how you're able to work with policymakers, in this case the Ministry of Health, to have real beneficial consequences. And reminds us, which a theme which has been common in this workshop, which they also mentioned, is that it's important to pay attention to the survivors of sexual violence and to think of ways to improve the situation rather than simply as a source of data. And now I'll turn it to Aisha Ibrahim, who will speak, your last speaker.
Merci beaucoup. I'm going to speak in French. I want to thank my co-panelists who actually set the ground for what I'm going to talk about. I think I'm going to share an experience as well of working with the collaborative project. This project started in 2006 and ended in 2011. And it's the Pathways of Women's Empowerment Research Program, a consortium. It was facilitated by IGS in Sussex. And that lasted for 5 years and was funded by DFID now UK Aid. It was an interdisciplinary women's studies project in which we tried to look at how women are empowered, have been empowered, the pathways to women's empowerment, what has helped them, and what has deterred as empowerment. Interestingly, all of we had 4 hubs. One is in BRAC University, which is in Bangladesh. Another is the Center for Gender Advocacy in Ghana. Then there's the Interdisciplinary Women's Studies Nucleus at the Federal University of Bahia in Brazil. And then the Social Research Center at the American University in Cairo. So there were 4 hubs, one in South Asia, one in Africa, 2 in Africa, one in the Middle East, one in Southern Africa, and then the other one was in Latin America, Brazil. There were academics, activists, and practitioners. So even though the hubs were hosted at universities, the academics had to work with CSOs and other practitioners. And what we set out to do was to find out what works to enhance women's empowerment, so the negative and the positive factors that work to enhance women's empowerment globally. So it was a comparative study. So we wanted to see what are the pathways, what policies, how have civil wars changed women's empowerment, have they enhanced or deterred women's empowerment. We looked at there were 4 things that each group had to work with, each hub had to work around. And the things were conceptions of empowerment and change, building constituencies for justice and equality, empowering work, changing narratives of sexuality. And each project had to locate empowerment in women's everyday life. So every project had to look at these 4 things and within their own context, and look at the policies and processes and then the strategies to change. So for me, I worked with the West African Hub, which was based in Ghana, and we had 3 researchers on sales. Myself, Hussein Abdullah, and Agency came, who was with the Human Rights Commission. And we worked with 3 NGOs in Sierra Leone. So it was a 50-50 group, CGG and Women's Forum. So there were 3. But what happened was after the academics met and decided to take part in this process, in this research project, we had to go back to our countries and then engage CSOs and activists and parts of our organizations to see what areas of research they were interested in and how they could take part in these processes. At the end of the process, we had 6 books. This is what came out of the whole process. 6 books, 30 case studies, 6 synthesis reports, 9 things, including one that is called the 30% on the countries. So it's called 30% because of the campaign for 30% quota in Sierra Leone, which we did in Sierra Leone, and which was nominated at the Sundance Festival. So we've been using that particular documentary to help advocate for 30% in Sierra Leone. Why was this collaboration successful? Number one, because it had a very strong communication strategy. Very strong one. Our whole team was working in communication from ideas, and each hub had a communication team that worked directly with the main hub in ideas. So you had things like blogs, you had writing. Then there was a lista. And then the creation of the hubs, I think, was very important. So it was not centralized. So even though it was a global project, we still had a hub that was that we shared similarities with. So the West African hub, it was Nigeria, Ghana, and Sierra Leone. So there were some similarities in terms of culture, and of course language was English. So that was easy. So the creation of hubs was very important to the regions. And then the good thing about that was we had equal access to information. But the power dynamics was really, really broken down. It wasn't like you had a folder somewhere or everybody had to report to. We had facilitators ideas, but every hub had their own, the head of the hub and the person that makes the decision, makes the budget and so on and so forth. And then there was freedom to make changes. Working within those things, but we still have the freedom to make changes depending on the context in our countries. Every project had to interrogate the same issue from their own context. And then another thing that made it very successful was there was a strong training component. There were lots of methodology workshops, both regionally and globally, and by hubs as well. And there was a training of young researchers. That was part of the requirement of the process. That young researchers from universities and civil society organizations had to be trained on a regular basis to be able to take part and to be able to conduct effective research. Then there were frequent regional meetings, expertise shared among partners. So at times you find somebody from the South Asian hub coming to the West African hub to share expertise and to train people in methodology or to look at the materials that have been generated already for analysis. So we had that as well. And there was also the mentoring of younger researchers by more experienced researchers. So you find somebody like Professor Pedro Manu, with somebody like myself in Sierra Leone and other Sierra Leone researchers. Then you had academic activists, practitioners all working together on the research project. I think that was a very good thing. And then there were co-publications. It gave the opportunity for CSOs to be able to publish, not just the academics. So you can co-write an article with a CSO, you can co-write an article with another academic. There was also support to attend conferences and exchanges. And At the end of the project, there was a big meeting where the project was disseminated within countries and in the region as well. But of course, what does this mean? There's a lot of money had to go into this project. I mean, without money, I think this would have been possible at all. And commitment of the researchers at academic institutions as well as the researchers in the CSOs to work together. However, there are limitations to this collaboration. For some hubs, that for our hub, there was an importance of poor internet connections. The technology that exists for some members of the hub were much more better than the ones that existed for some of us. So some of us were not able to take part in online discussions, to do blogs and things like that, to respond in time, to download materials that were sent to us. So those were some of the limitations. And if you can see, if you look at the books and the articles that came out, there were 6 books and 30 case studies and over 40 articles. You can see that most of them came from, even though all the regions did provide, did contribute to all of this material, but most of them came from areas where people had access to doing research and to writing. They have a culture of writing knowledge. And then, what has been done, for us as a one of the things that happened was, when we talked about, one of the things was changing nature of sexuality. And how did we decide on the topic that we chose? First we said, we're not going to look at sexual violence and conflict, because that was 2006. And there was a saturation of research projects of like students, foreign nationals, and civilians that had been a lot of that. So we wanted to give that a break and then look at other forms of sexuality and sexual violence in different places. So we looked at FGM to some extent, and then we looked at the question of homosexuality. And then so, what I think we should be thinking of doing at this point is look at what has been done in your country, what has been done on the issue of sexual violence, what has been done in your sub-region, and what has been done regionally. Because if all of them are focused on the same issue, then what are some of the issues that have been left out? What are those issues? And what can we do about the issues that have been left out? How can we create a network around looking at those issues that have been left out in the research that already exists? I also think that the exchange of information among members of the network is extremely important, and how this information is shared is also very important. We're looking to have a network that where countries do not have the same access. We need to look at that. And what she answered about budgeting for certain things is very important. We have to have those type of access in the budget for us to be able to have a successful network. I think that's about it.
Many thanks, Aisha. Great to draw on your own experience as well in the network and look at, again, the great possibilities and some limitations, which is important to remember, such as technological limitations. And a point you raised, which also was raised by others, it's important to reflect on that there has been a fair bit of research on this topic already, particularly in certain areas, certain geographical regions. So it's important not to replicate it, but perhaps to look at what's missing, as well as to make sure the dissemination channels are such that people know about this research and they aren't sitting in a shelf in an NGO or in a university somewhere. I now would like to introduce our last speaker. I'm delighted Marie-Josette Manzima is going to speak about her experience and understanding of the research network.
Merci, je n'ai plus de parler puisque c'est comme si nous sommes dans un même pays. La réalité ne diffère pas. Mais en général, chez nous en RDC, la recherche est en souffrance. Je ne sais pas si mes frères et sœurs peuvent me compléter. Ou bien je ne connais pas la réalité des grandes villes de la RDC. Je vais parler de mes expériences au fin fond de la RDC, donc à Burundi. Nous avons des universités, des institutions universitaires, nous avons un centre de recherche, mais tous ces chercheurs travaillent d'une façon dispersée. Si quelqu'un a ces données, il les cache. C'est ça notre problème. Donc, il n'y a pas une collaboration entre les chercheurs. Les femmes des associations travaillent en synergie, en collaboration, mais pas nous les chercheurs. C'est un biais-là privé les données. Mais ça commence déjà à changer. Surtout les chercheurs des universités n'ont pas un endroit pour publier. Maintenant, ils viennent avec leurs articles dans le centre de recherche. Et ce centre de recherche a été créé, ça fait 20 ans. C'est une institution étatique, mais l'État n'a jamais financé un seul projet de recherche. Mais on doit publier. Un attaché de recherche doit publier 4 articles par an. Sinon, vous êtes mis à la porte. Et on a vu, nous avons beaucoup de problèmes sur le terrain. Que faire? Est-ce qu'il faut croiser les bras? On s'est mis à faire la recherche avec nos propres moyens. Puisqu'il y a des problèmes sur le terrain. C'est pourquoi ce centre a ouvert maintenant la porte à tous les chercheurs. Et les chercheurs viennent avec les articles dans ce centre et on les publie. Et maintenant, le centre a compris qu'il faut travailler en collaboration. Il y a les résultats de ces recherches qu'il est en train de mettre à la disposition des associations. Il y a un travail qui a été fait sur le harcèlement sexuel en milieu professionnel. Il a mis les résultats à la disposition d'une association qui est en train de sensibiliser, de lutter contre le harcèlement sexuel en milieu scolaire. Et cette sensibilisation a intéressé les gens, plus que même la sensibilisation contre le viol. Alors on dit, c'est une autre forme de viol. Où est-ce que vous étiez? Nous avons perdu beaucoup de nos filles. Il y en a qui ne savent plus continuer avec les études. Il y en a qui sont mortes, victimes de harcèlement sexuel par les enseignants, par les autorités scolaires, etc. Il y a encore un travail sur les violences conjugales faites aux femmes dans la cité de Burundi. Les femmes eux-mêmes ont donné des solutions à leurs problèmes. Alors il y a une association qui a récupéré ces résultats qui va commencer la sensibilisation. Mais par manque de moyens, on est limité. On ne sait plus aller, on ne sait pas aller dans les territoires. On est limité dans l'espace et dans le temps. Donc moi je trouve que si on travaillait en collaboration avec les autres chercheurs qui ont peut-être le moyen.
Le micro contient peu.
Vous m'obligez à arrêter les autres. On est limité dans le temps et dans l'espace. Il y a des chercheurs, il y a des institutions qui ont des moyens. Venez nous aider. Le terrain est encore vide. Je crois que pour cette recherche, il ne faut pas faire seulement avec les victimes. Il y a d'autres sujets. Il y a par exemple ce qu'a fait l'institution, la gestion traditionnelle du viol.
Est-ce que
Le
je peux
viol a
traduire?
existé
Est-ce que
depuis
je peux
longtemps.
traduire? Ok.
She's saying that they are limited to their capacity, and if they can have collaboration with Nordic researchers, that's everything enough funds, it will be helpful for them. And also, she pointed out that it isn't the topic of research should not be only focused on victims, that there are other topics for research.
Par exemple, la gestion du viol dans les milieux traditionnels.
For example, the management of sexual violence in traditional
Settings.
environments.
Le viol a existé depuis longtemps.
Sexual violence exists since a long time.
Mais nos ancêtres savaient gérer ça d'une façon ou d'une autre.
But our ancestors knew how to manage it in different ways.
Est-ce que nous ne pouvons pas récupérer ce qui était de positif?
What has not allowed us to recuperate what has been positive in that?
Chez nous, la loi réprimant les violences sexuelles, les gens n'ont pas accepté ça. On m'a dit que c'est tombé du ciel.
And in their country, people are not accepting the legislation, the law against LGBT, because they think it's it comes from
Top down.
Oui. Avec tout ce qu'il y a comme impunité et corruption, les gens préfèrent maintenant l'arrangement à l'amiable. Donc, en conclusion, je peux dire que, en tout cas, je suis pour la collaboration, le travail en synergie. J'ai dit et je vous remercie.
Merci, Gilbert, for driving home very different material situation for a number of organizations in different parts of sub-Saharan Africa and in different parts of Africa. And the need and the important need to generate research funds to enable better collaborations but ways to also think the importance of drawing upon local women to find research topics that may not be generated in academic circles but are very important, such as traditional means of addressing sexual violence. I now open it up. I think we were supposed to stop around 4:30, but I think we'll go a bit beyond that since we're starting late. So we'll take 4 questions like before, and then we'll go from there.
Wouldn't it be better to have coffee and then come back and have questions and a discussion?
Sure.
Is the coffee ready? Is the coffee ready?
Is coffee ready?
Is coffee ready?
So
this moves right into your last
yeah.
session.
So I think we'll take at least a couple questions. Or?
Sure, I don't know. I don't think coffee's ready yet.
Okay. We're just seeing if the coffee is ready. The suggestion is that we perhaps have a coffee break and then go into the question and then going into the last panel. Like Doris is just checking to see if the coffee is ready. So I think in the meantime, we can at least take one or 2 questions. So we'll start with you. The mic. Did Doris take the mic? Okay.
Micromanager.
Here comes another microphone.
Relinquish power.
That's over here.
She takes voice with her.
Merci. Merci aux panélistes de nous avoir partagé l'expérience sur le réseautage. Et je comprends qu'il est très important de travailler en réseau pour des questions de recherche sur les violences sexuelles. Comme vous l'avez souligné, ça crée des violences. Donc, je disais que je comprends qu'il est très important de travailler en réseau pour des questions de recherche sur les violences sexuelles. Comme la plupart des panélistes l'ont souligné, ça peut créer des énergies qui peuvent engendrer des changements sociaux. Et associer les chercheurs, académiciens et les organisations de la société civile, je crois que ça a l'avantage de réunir les deux dimensions, la dimension théorie et la dimension pratique, comme l'a souligné Madame Jessica. Il faut remettre de la tête d'éditeur dans ce genre de recherche. Et ce n'est pas toujours évident que les théories académiciennes sont sensibles au genre. Et raison pour laquelle une dose d'analyse genre et féministe est très importante. Mais ma petite question, je voudrais que les panélistes puissent faire un petit commentaire sur un aspect que la plupart des réseaux rencontrent, un défi que la plupart des réseaux rencontrent. Par exemple, je vais parler de la question du droit d'auteur, l'aspect visibilité, parce que par exemple, si nous travaillons à 4 ou à 5, il y a certains gens qui auront peur parce que leur contribution ne sera pas à juste titre reconnue. Comment vous pensez régler ce problème de droit d'auteur ou de visibilité si on regarde l'organisation contribuante de façon individuelle?
So before we go to the next question, we're going to take up to 4 questions before asking the panelists to respond. Joanne just informed me that coffee isn't ready. In fact, they thought we had the coffee break already. So we're wondering, we're suggesting, if everyone's fine with it, to continue on with the discussion here for 15-20 minutes and then move right into the last, the roundup stage, talking about ways forward. Partially because some people are getting ready to leave later on tonight and all that. So are people willing to forfeit the coffee break and continue on with the discussion? Maybe, comprenez-vous mon question?
Ils traduisent même plus.
Traduisent plus. Yeah. Est-ce qu'on traduit? Ils n'ont pas traduit là. On traduit? What happened?
No, donc,
We're not translating.
Okay. Le pause café n'est pas là maintenant parce que ils ont pensé que nous avons le pause café. Donc, nous suggesterons que nous continuons avec les discussions avec ce panel et immédiatement après, nous avons le wrap-up session. Ça va? Donc, comprenez-vous je m'excuse mon français.
On a compris, c'est bien.
Ma question, c'est pour les universitaires canadiens qu'on a ici.
Okay, un moment. I just want to make sure, is everyone fine with that?
Non,
Yeah, I just want to make sure everyone's fine to continue on, okay?
La traduction, c'est qu'on pose encore des questions, mais les réponses seront faites après le café.
Oui.
C'est ça. Est-ce que tout le monde est d'accord avec ça?
No coffee. No.
Ah, il n'y a pas de café. C'est pas déjà plat.
On va continuer jusqu'à la fin.
Ça va tout le monde? Is it okay to continue on with no coffee break? Please put up your hand if it's okay to continue.
Levez la main pour ceux qui veulent continuer pour son café. Alors, ma question, c'est pour les universités francophones. On a beaucoup plus de problèmes ici dans la région des Grands Lacs pour avoir des liens avec des universités comme par exemple avec le Canada. Donc vous qui êtes ici, avez-vous des publications en français? Qu'on puisse avoir un network avec les universités francophones, spécialement celles du Congo. Même au Burundi, on a aussi des problèmes. Au Rwanda, c'est un peu moins, parce que l'anglais est là de plus en plus. Mais vraiment, le Burundi et le Congo. Donc ça, c'est la question, parce qu'il y a vraiment une carence dramatique pour les universités francophones. C'est ça que je veux poser comme question.
Thank you. We can take 2 more questions.
Merci beaucoup. Moi, j'interviens par rapport à l'analyse du contexte. Je l'ai dit, on est en train de mener une étude. Mais est-ce que les chercheurs ne peuvent pas d'abord faire l'analyse du contexte pour voir comment est-ce qu'elles seront perçues dans ces milieux et comment est-ce qu'elles peuvent s'assurer d'une certaine sécurité pendant qu'elles seront en train d'interviewer les personnes. Pourquoi j'ai dit ça? Je reviens au cas de Jessica. Jessica dit qu'elle a interviewé des personnes, mais il y a des personnes qui l'ont pointé du doigt. À ce moment-là, il y a une relation entre l'interviewé et l'enquêteur. Et aussi, cette situation peut mettre en état d'insécurité la personne qui mène l'étude. Est-ce que vous considérez ça quand vous faites vos études? Et la deuxième question, c'est par rapport à la prise en compte des hommes. Là, je me dis, ça va se faire de quelle façon? Puisque nous savons qu'il y a des hommes qui ne sont pas auteurs de violences sexuelles. Il y a des hommes qui sont auteurs de violences sexuelles, mais qui ont bénéficié d'une certaine immunité à partir des fonctions qu'ils occupent dans les pays. Et troisièmement, il y a des hommes victimes de violences sexuelles qui n'ont pas assez de moyens, qui n'ont pas une position dans les pays, mais qui se retrouvent en prison. Ça, c'est encore une autre cible, puisque là, en prison, il faut un accompagnement psychologique. Voilà un peu, je pose cette question, je fais cette observation pour qu'ensemble nous essayons de voir comment est-ce que nous pouvons considérer les hommes dans les études sur les violences sexuelles. Merci.
Oui, voilà la dernière question.
Merci, j'ai 2 réactions, 2 questions si vous voulez. Une c'est pour Jessica et une autre c'est pour ma soeur dont je n'ai pas retrouvé le nom, pour Jessica d'abord, tout à l'heure dans son exposé, elle a donné un exemple qu'elle, en tant que chercheur, elle ne pourrait pas défendre son but en occuper une autre position. Alors maintenant, ma question est de savoir, est-ce que les chercheurs les chercheurs, je suppose, ont beaucoup d'informations fiables que le reste des personnes. Est-ce que, Jessica, à votre avis, vous pensez que les chercheurs ne devraient pas, du moins débattre pour la vérité qu'est ce terrain, puisqu'ils sont supposés la connaître? Et ma deuxième question, c'est pour ma sœur. Quand elle a parlé des bonnes pratiques qu'on peut avoir dans la gestion des viols par nos ancêtres, il serait vraiment très curieux de savoir, parce que dans notre culture chez nous, les viols, il n'y a pas très longtemps, ce n'était même pas considéré comme des crimes, pas vraiment des crimes comme tels, c'était quelque chose comme des faits de société, oui, voilà. Alors, il y avait plusieurs manières de gérer cela. Dans certains cas même, on a imposé à l'auteur du viol d'épouser la victime. Et pour moi, on condamnait totalement la victime à être violée tout le reste de sa vie. Et d'autres manières, je n'ai jamais vraiment vu un cas où on a reconnu le viol comme un crime et où on a dédommagé la victime. Alors, je suis en train de me demander si aujourd'hui on est en train de lutter avec l'impunité dans le domaine du viol, comment allons-nous pouvoir concilier avec les pratiques de nos ancêtres? Je vous remercie.
Thank you. We'll now turn to the panel for responses. Do you want to start, Gilbert? Vous pouvez commencer.
J'ai quelques mots à rapport avec la première question sur le droit d'auteur. Moi-même, j'ai été victime. Nous avons commencé un travail ensemble, mais j'ai dû aller aux études. En revenant, mon nom ne figure pas. Mais il y a un professeur qui est passé après pour dire que même si vous avez contribué, même avec une carte, il faut qu'on reconnaisse ton travail. Donc chez nous maintenant, il n'y a pas un problème. Tous ceux-là qui contribuent, leurs noms doivent apparaître à l'article. Et la deuxième question, nos universités et les centres de recherche publient en français. Et pour nous autres, on commence par une pré-enquête. S'il y a des difficultés sur le terrain, en tout cas, on ne fait pas. Puisque chez nous, il ne faut pas oser vous y laisser la tête. Ou bien on passe par les associations qui sont sur le terrain. Troisième question, en tout cas, il y a un problème en rapport avec la prise en charge des victimes de sexe masculin. Ça, en tout cas, c'est la réalité. En rapport avec la gestion, nous sommes en train de faire la recherche. Nous avons déjà fait la recherche avec une tribu. Je réponds je m'appelle Mandine Marie-Gilbert. Donc, on a déjà commencé cette recherche, la gestion traditionnelle. On a fait dans une tribu, par exemple, pour cette tribu-là, on mettait le bourreau à côté de l'eau. Il y a l'eau, il y a la terre et il y a le ciel. Alors on le maudissait. En tout cas, mon cher, si tu répètes encore cet acte, tu es là à côté de l'eau. Pour vivre, tu as besoin de cette eau-là. Tu as besoin de la terre qui te donne de la nourriture. Tu as besoin du ciel pour la lumière, etc. En tout cas, devant ces trois éléments, on te maudit. Si tu oses encore que ces trois éléments s'occupent de toi. Alors, nous sommes liés à la culture. En tout cas, le type abandonne. Une autre façon, vraiment, on donne des coups à votre appareil génital. Ça, c'est dans les signes. Ça, c'est la violence. sont les hommes qui donnent des cours.
Ah, pas des femmes.
Non, pas des femmes.
C'était des choses compliquées.
Alors, par manque de moyens, on ne sait pas vraiment avancer dans les autres trucs. Mais petit à petit, on saura ça et puis on va faire la synthèse de tout cela pour mettre à la disposition de la population. Puisque ce centre fait la recherche opérationnelle. Et on doit publier et mettre les résultats à la disposition de la population. Je crois que j'ai un peu répondu.
Pour le lien entre les universités francophones avec nos universités dans les pays développés, je crois que c'est une préoccupation qui est d'actualité dans les universités, dans nos universités africaines. Nous sommes souvent confrontés à des problèmes de publication à l'extérieur et il est bon que dans le cadre du réseau aussi, nous puissions avoir cette possibilité-là de changer nos articles. Et ce serait vraiment la bienvenue. Ça a encouragé parce que en Afrique, nous n'avons pas assez de revues, de publications même. Donc, c'est une occasion, je pense, qui est assez intéressante à saisir pour permettre à nos chercheurs d'échanger leurs travaux avec les universités des pays développés. Merci.
I don't have much to add here. Not being based in a Francophone university, I'm no help to you whatsoever. But because I'm at York in Toronto, I'm not in Quebec. But I would note, and it's linked to the question about intellectual property and the rights of authors, that I think there's more and more of a move towards open source publishing. So more authors are willing to have their articles available, not in books that you have to buy or journals to which you have to subscribe, but rather on the internet. And I think it's something that we can work towards in our networks as well, is to be creative about dissemination, including films, documentaries, short YouTube videos, helping NGOs build websites that get lots of hits and things like that. So I think we have to be creative about dissemination and respect our make sure that everybody's names are on the articles.
Two issues, one on perpetrators, and I'm going to, when someone talked about perpetrators, the need for men to participate either as victims or perpetrators. I think the research in this area would benefit from interviewing men who are perpetrators of sexual violence, so that we can find out, because right now many of us are interviewing victims, many of whom are women, and we have not really, apart from assuming that rape is used as a weapon of war and therefore is used to cow or to just scatter the victim, to scatter the population so that maybe people can take the minerals. But these men already have guns. Why do they need rape as well? It would be interesting to find some perpetrators, and I believe that kind of research will benefit us as we try to find sustainable ways of ending this violation of women's bodies. Now, the researcher as patriots. Yes, the findings are that if the findings are truly showing that we need, in our dissemination, we can truly defend our countries. Unfortunately, there are times where the research findings show the opposite, and then patriotism still takes over, and the researcher still goes out to defend what is indefensible. But definitely, if the results are showing that whatever other people's assumptions are wrong, then definitely in our dissemination of our findings, we need to show the truth where it is according to our findings. Then of course other people might find out other things, and then there's a debate, but definitely I'm not calling for anybody to be untruthful to the findings. Thank you.
I think just a clarification, I think we need to make a distinction between acknowledging an article and being a co-author. Okay, it depends on what you're looking for, and that's how you become a co-author. So if you have worked on the project completely with the person and the people, then you have to, then it has to come out as a co-author. And you're going to be acknowledged in the person. But the person is maybe a research assistant, or somebody who works in the office, or something like that. So I think that distinction is to be made. The co-author is different from being acknowledged. And another thing I want to talk about is the difficulty of having networks in terms of communication when there's English and French. The one that I was in, there was no French speaking person, but I think translation is very, very expensive. So people do not get into that. And I think the communication process becomes very tedious. The networks are usually organized according to interest, of course, and according to languages.
Thank you. We can take a few more questions for the panel. Chantal, the microphone, please. Give the coffee.
Merci. Je voudrais d'abord remercier les panélistes pour leurs exposés. C'est vrai que nous connaissons tous qu'il est important de se mettre en réseau pour un travail plus productif et aussi pour des résultats parfois plus crédibles. Mais j'aurais quand même aimé qu'on puisse parler des modalités pratiques. Comment est-ce que les institutions académiques, les ONG, peuvent collaborer lorsqu'ils sont en réseau? Allons-nous définir des projets communs de recherche? Allons-nous seulement partager les résultats? Si nous devons définir des sujets de recherche ensemble, quelles sont les étapes que nous allons partager? Quelles sont les étapes que nous ne partageons pas? Je voudrais qu'on discute là-dessus pour voir pratiquement qu'est-ce qui pourrait se faire, ce qui nous permettrait de sortir de cette salle en se disant que chacun ou chacune, par rapport à l'organisation auquel il appartient ou elle appartient, il y a des possibilités d'être en réseau avec telle ou telle autre institution et nous pouvons peut-être travailler suivant les modalités qui peuvent être définies. Je crois que mon idée c'est qu'il y ait une relation telle que chacun y trouve son intérêt et surtout que les produits, les résultats de recherche soient des résultats très crédibles parce qu'ils auront tenu compte de plusieurs aspects, tant théoriques que pratiques sur le terrain, mais aussi, si ça se fait dans une région, dans un pays, il y aura des acteurs locaux, mais aussi un œil extérieur. Donc l'analyse est plus objective.
Thank you. Other questions? Okay.
Merci. Donc, je remercie vraiment les panélistes pour nous avoir fait partager leur riche expérience. Moi, je voulais surtout souligner, en fait, il y a Chantal qui a pris beaucoup de préoccupations en compte, mais seulement, je voulais souligner que la recherche doit vraiment être un enrichissement mutuel. C'est vrai, nous ne pouvons pas aller de l'avant sans le réseautage. Et ce réseautage doit être une source d'enrichissement mutuel. Mais aussi, le constat est que aujourd'hui, dans nos universités, nous sommes un peu en arrière par rapport aux outils, aux nouveaux outils qui sont en train d'être développés. Et ces recherches, ce réseautage doit permettre à nos institutions de se hisser un peu au niveau. Parce que je vais vous faire partager une toute petite expérience que j'ai vécue. Nous avons un centre d'assistance pour les femmes victimes de violence. Quand elles viennent, on les enregistre, on les assiste, on les écoute. Nous, on enregistre les temps. Et un jour, il y a une université hollandaise qui nous dit nous avons 2 étudiants qui doivent venir, qui s'intéressent à la question des violences faites aux femmes. Nous avons dit, il n'y a pas de problème, on le résout. Les 2 étudiants sont venus avec nos données de base. Ils ont travaillé, ils ont utilisé des outils que nous, on ignorait complètement sur la question, et ils ont produit vraiment un document formidable sur la question, avec leurs outils d'analyse. Bon, maintenant, quand ils ont fini leur travail, ils nous ont fait partager leur expérience. Comment ils ont mené l'analyse. Et l'analyse nous a beaucoup enrichi, parce que maintenant on se dit combien de temps on se met pour écouter cette personne et quel est le degré d'assistance, combien de temps la personne fait devant une juridiction, combien ça. Donc nous, on ne faisait pas cette analyse-là. Nous seulement, c'était de les assister, de pouvoir trouver un réconfort moral, une assistance psychologique, une assistance financière, ça s'arrêtait là. D'autres choses qui s'est cachées derrière ces femmes, derrière ces données, on ne les avait pas. Donc, ça a été vraiment un enrichissement mutuel, mais nos étudiants qui sont aussi dans nos universités ont beaucoup d'habitats. Et nous pensons que les échanges entre universitaires aussi vont permettre à nos jeunes aussi de comprendre et de s'intéresser à la recherche. Parce que les mémoires que nous produisons aujourd'hui, je ne dis pas que ce n'est pas utile, mais ça ne contient pas vraiment beaucoup de matière. Donc nous devons les intéresser à ça. Voilà, c'est quelques commentaires que je voulais faire par rapport à ce panel. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you. And what we'll do now, we'll ask the panelists to respond to those 2 good questions and comments. And then we'll have a 5-minute break. They have made the coffee after all. So I'll ask people to, if you want a coffee, to go get a coffee. You can bring it back here, but only 5 minutes so we can have a wrap-up session. Wrapping up not too late because a few people have to leave tonight and want to unwind and prepare for their travels. So I'll ask the panelists to respond to those 2 points, 2 questions. And then we'll have a 5-minute break, okay? Aisha, do you want to begin? Do you have any comments? No?
Okay, see, if you say yes at this point, you're reading. It's like when you tell the students that they're going to go for break, and then you start talking. I'll be very quick, just because I think it's a specific question directed at me, and also my colleague. I think it's really. I gave another talk about participatory action research that was called What Participation, What Action? because I think that the modalities and the ways in which we design our projects still need more participation. Because, of course, in order to get the funding, the research design is fairly advanced. So what we did in our project was the actual research project came out of the Coalition for Women's Human Rights, which identified forced marriage and war as a topic that needed more work in 2008. Then I applied for funding. But often that's not how it works. You apply for funding with partners, but it's time constraints and so on. So there's a lot of design that goes in already. So what we did was we tried to have as open a discussion as possible about the actual questionnaire, actual informed consent. The research partners chose the locations for where the interviews will take place. They chose all of the partners with whom they will work, and so that's how we've been working. But I recognize that I don't consider it a participatory action research project, because if that were the case, it would be the communities affected who would design that questionnaire, not the research teams. We would have had an extra year, actually, I would argue. You would add another year to the design, which I think is great. It's not in this project, so I wouldn't defend it as participatory.
Oui, en fait, je voudrais échanger aussi mes idées par rapport à la réaction de l'hôpital qui nous a interpellés, sinon soulevé la préoccupation de savoir quelles sont les modalités que nous souhaitons au niveau donc du réseautage. Il faut dire que nous avons donné plus de réflexion. Donc c'est au sortir des échanges que nous allons voir ce qui serait faisable. Mais l'idéal, en tout cas, ce qui me concerne, aurait été que, aussi bien que nous puissions échanger les travaux de recherche et les résultats, que de concevoir aussi des projets en commun pour que l'exécution puisse être, on pourrait dire, holistique, prenne en compte tous les aspects, parce que nous travaillons dans le domaine donc, de violence sexuelle. Nous savons que ça implique plusieurs dimensions et que, donc si au niveau universitaire, les ONG, on s'assoit pour élaborer un projet, on fera tout pour que ce projet-là puisse prendre en compte tous les aspects et que ça puisse être traité de façon efficace. Donc l'idéal aurait été que ce soit des projets en commun qui sont rédigés, mais on verra ce qui est faisable. Et je crois que là, la solution n'appartient pas à une seule personne. Merci.
Moi aussi, je suis de l'avis de mon frère. D'emblée, comme ça, faire sortir des modalités, c'est un peu difficile, puisque la réalité diffère d'un milieu à un autre. Nous allons rentrer chacun chez soi, et puis à une réunion, pendant la restitution, on verra ce qu'on peut faire avec les différents intervenants. En tout cas, moi, seul comme ça, je ne peux pas engager les intervenants.
Merci. And let me ask us to give a warm round of applause for a great panel. A lot of important issues were raised by the panelists as well as from the rest of the participants here. And we're going to take a 5-minute break, so just before 5 o'clock we'll return. And we're going to think about next steps going forward. Elaborate